On today's special crossover edition of Locked on Wild and Locked on Stars, coming soon to an arena near you, a star-studded tilt between the Wilds and the Stars.
Hey, this is Matt Boldy, and you're listening to Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, everybody, and welcome to the special crossover edition of Locked on Stars and Locked on Wild. Me and Seth met before the season, so what has happened since then? Well, the Minnesota Wild are off to a fantastic start this season. The Dallas Stars have been up and down. It has been a lot of fun, and the Stars and Wild meet for the first time tomorrow, so it's going to be a big one. First off, let's introduce Seth Toupal of Locked on Wild. Seth, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you again. How are you, my friend? I know there's some good personal news right now for you, so I'm excited for that.
Yeah, in the midst of some changes, as the audience can see behind me, boxes and other things. So we'll have the official reveal, I think, next week. But yeah, it's a good time for me to be following the Wild because, as you alluded to, just off to a terrific start, and that's going to make this matchup between these two teams all that much more fun.
Absolutely. We're going to dive straight into things, but first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. By the way, this is being recorded on Wednesday, so we do not know if the Stars or Wild are coming off a win or a loss in their Thursday contest. But Seth, what a start for the Wild. Tell me about what's happened since the last time we have talked. And Kirill Kaprizov, he is just dominating the entire National Hockey League right now. How fun has it been this start in particular?
It's been great. And everything that went wrong last year, from inconsistent goaltending to porous defense to a lack of depth scoring, even to the mentality of the team as things started to kind of unravel during the year, it's been the polar opposite so far this year. Who knew having two guys that are on pace for 50 goals would help you get off to a good start? Because Kirill has been insane. Matt Boldy's off to a fantastic start this year, but it's been really good goaltending. Philip Gustafsson up near the top of the leaderboard in terms of goals against average and save percentage. He has just been, with the exception of a game here or there, he's been fantastic. And I really like what John Hynes has done from a mentality standpoint for this team this year. He has challenged the team to be even keel. He's challenged the team to be locked in and engaged night in, night out, to try to avoid the letdowns that the Wild had at points last year. It just seemed like there were games where the moment something went wrong, it all fell apart. And he has really done a lot of work with trying to get this team in a much better psyche, which has led to a few instances in which things don't go well, and the Wild just continue to go about their business and pick up some big wins. They trailed 2-0 against Pittsburgh. They came back to win that game. They trailed against the Tampa Bay Lightning in one of their most recent games, and they came back to win that game as well. They just are not fazed by adversity. They have gotten off to some really good starts, especially on the road. It has been the full package, and it rides on the defense and the goaltending, and the offense has certainly been up to bat as well. So it's, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily one key aspect carrying this team. It's just everything so far has been clicking on all cylinders.
Something that has really reared its ugly head against the Stars in particular is the special teams play for Minnesota. The power play is rocking along about league average right now. I know the PK is below league average, but what have you seen on the special team side of things? Because I know the penalty kill is something that Minnesota was really trying to address in the offseason. I know they brought in Trenton, but what have you seen from that area of the game?
It's fascinating because I heard on one of the recent broadcasts that the Wild have a penalty kill above 85% on the road. And I was like, okay, hold the phone here. That means then that they're like below 50% at home, which is gross. But it is interesting because one of the things that I talked about last season was the need for the Wild to just try to avoid being penalized as much as they have in recent seasons. Yeah. They've been in the top 5 the last 3 seasons. In the last 2 seasons, I think they were in the top 3, very close to 1,000 penalty minutes each season. This year, they're 3rd fewest. And so they have really done a good job of playing much more disciplined hockey, but we're still seeing the penalty kill get a bit leaky. And for me, it's about 90% of what it needs to be. The problem is that in that other 10%, that's the difference between getting a successful kill and not. And it comes down to things like not being able to get the puck out of the zone, getting beat to a puck battle along the boards, or a clearing attempt that hits somebody and just deflects right back out to the top of the zone, so the team on the power play gets a chance to reset. So it's just these little, and John Hynes talked about this too. He doesn't feel like it's a scheme issue. It's just little individual things that happen that have led to goals against for this Minnesota Wild team. And on the power play, that unit gets a little stale sometimes, to where they're gripping the sticks a little bit too much and are trying to find the perfect avenue for shots. I'm not worried as much about them as I am about just finding a way to go from 90% efficient to 100% efficient, where then those penalty kill numbers will get back up into the 80s, and I won't have to keep talking about like, hey, we just crossed the 60% threshold. But the Wild were, I think, 12 of 12 on their most recent road trip on the penalty kill, including 6 of 6 against the Ducks in one game. I don't know how that happened, but I think that can be a springboard, because those units are both predicated on confidence. And I think if you can get a little confidence, get a couple successful kills going, that maybe that'll help them along the way as well.
I think the Stars have been in a similar boat when you mention the power play has kind of gone stale. And for Stars fans, I'm sure many of them are hoping this is the perfect time to see Minnesota on the road, where the power play has struck gold a few times in recent memory. You mentioned the great start on the road. They're 7-1-2. It's been a road heavy schedule. They play Dallas, of course, tomorrow at the wonderful XL Energy Center. What has made them a very good road team? I know Dallas last season was, I think, one of the best in the entire NHL. What are you seeing from the Wilds away from the X so far this year?
I think the Wild kind of feed off of trying to go into an opponent's arena and shut their fans up. Forgive the phrasing there, but that's basically what it is they're going in, they're just trying to quiet the home fans. And they have done a really good job of just finding a way to get the early goal and putting their opponent on the offensive for the rest of the game. And Philip Gustafson, Marc-Andre Fleury have had some really good starts on the road as well. And I think it's a team that, John Hynes said this when the season started. The training camp for the Wild this year was much more strenuous than it's been in years past, to try to, I think, get this team ready for the vigor of a road trip, especially a 7-game road trip like the Wild had to basically start the season this year. And so for as many times as we saw the Wild give up the first goal last year, it seems like they just have done a much better job of getting that first goal and just continuing to attack. And even on the road, when you don't have your best stuff, the Wild have had periods this year where they maybe have limited possession time and they still find a way to get 1 or 2 goals on the road. And that's exactly what you have to do as a road team.
Yeah, if you get good goaltending, you can close out a lot of games, and that's what the Stars did last season. You look at Jake Ottinger; his save percentage, I think, was top 5 on the road last season. At home, it was abysmal. It ranked about 25th. It could have been even worse. When you're able to marry those two things together, you're going to get a lot of wins. And they've beat some very good teams. You mentioned Florida. And Tampa Bay. I know there's some people that are out there saying maybe the schedule isn't very hard, but if they beat teams they beat them.
Yeah.
You don't make the schedule. Is that something you're at least a good sign moving forward? Is even the teams that they should be beating, they are beating, and they're beating comfortably.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is they're not, for the most part. I know the most recent game against Chicago was one of those look bad games, but if you think about it, played the back-to-back against Anaheim and San Jose, then had to travel to Chicago from the West Coast. So you're taking up basically a full day doing that, and then you have a 6 p.m. game the next day. Tired legs, and finding a way to get a point in that game is, I think, what separates this year from last year. Last year's Wild team, I don't think, gets a point in that game against Chicago. This year's team, they didn't have their best stuff, but they found a way to at least get it to overtime against Chicago. And you talk about Florida, Tampa Bay. Andre Vasilevsky played in both of those games, and they won just fine. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. It just seems like the Wild are much more prepared for what they need to do. And if they have periods or stretches of play where they kind of stray from the game plan, they just have had a much easier time this year of getting back on track, getting back and getting centered, and just going back to work.
Yeah, they're going back to work. They're trying to get back to the postseason, and tomorrow's game is one of those measuring stick contests for both sides. So can't wait to see it play out. Alrighty, on the other side, Seth is going to hit me with some hard questions. I'm actually really curious to hear his thoughts from afar on the Dallas Stars as well, and we will hear that in just a moment. Today's crossover edition of Locked On Stars and Locked On Wild is brought to you by Mint Mobile. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNHL. There you'll see that right now. All 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all your existing contacts. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/LockedOnNHL. That's mintmobile.com/LockedOnNHL. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/LockedOnNHL. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Today's episode is also brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Nothing delivers comfort and joy quite like the unrivaled quality and taste of Omaha Steaks. This year, skip the holiday hustle and bustle and save 50% off gourmet gifts site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, get a $30 reward card when you shop early and score an extra $30 off with promo code NHL. It's the holiday season upcoming. I'm already thinking about getting my brother-in-law some Omaha Steaks. He loves to be on the grill. He's a grill master, so get your steaks from Omaha Steaks. With 5 generations of experience, they can consistently deliver the world's best steak experience, and the gifting experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to deliver the perfect gift with thoughtfully curated gift packages starting at $89.99. From legendary steaks to mouthwatering desserts and more, save 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners get an extra $30 off with promo code NHL. And a $30 reward card when you shop early. That's 50% off at omahasteaks.com, omahasteaks.com, and an extra $30 off with promo code LOCKEDONNHL. Minimum purchase may require. Alrighty, Seth, it's your turn to grill this side of things here on Locked On Stars. Dallas, bit of a rocky start, but they're trying to figure it out. And I'm really curious to see how Dallas shows up against a team that's off to a fantastic start. They got completely boat raced by Winnipeg the other night. So I'm putting a lot more stock in this game than maybe I normally should on a Saturday night in November.
Yeah, this is a fun early test for both of these teams, and you've got a Minnesota Wild team who is playing really well coming into this matchup, but I think hopefully has quite a memory of how these games have gone over the last few seasons. But obviously, when you're talking Dallas Stars and Minnesota Wild, there's always going to be the link between Jason Robertson and Kirill Kaprizov.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at Kaprizov right now, he is, at last check, second in the NHL in points behind some guy named Nathan McKinnon. I don't know who that is. I'm kidding. I know who it is. But I had a tweet brought to my attention that just lists Jason Robertson's point pace and shots per game over the last 3 seasons. So 2023, he was at 109 points and 3.82 shots per game. 2023-2024, 80 points and 2.82 shots per game. And so far this year, he's on a 41-point pace and 2.57 shots per game. So obviously a downward trend over the last 3 seasons. So Joey, I ask you, everything good with Robo so far this year?
Yeah, man, it's been a really, really slow start for him. And perhaps the Pavelski departure did a lot bigger of a number than many people anticipated on Rope, Hintz, and Jason Robertson. Of course, Pavelski was on that trio for the last 3 seasons, and Pavelski, even touching 40 years of age, was about a point per game. And we just haven't seen Robertson get back to that 109-point player since really last season. And perhaps it's possibly the Stars just have so many weapons they can go to that you can get scoring from any line. But that top line in particular has just not been the same. It's really been one of the more inconsistent lines for the Stars. And you can go up and down the roster, and there are a lot of different players that are not scoring at the level that you would have thought, right? I think you could put Rope into that conversation. You can put Wyatt Johnston into that conversation. Right now, your 2 leading goal scorers are Matt Duchene and Tyler Seguin. It feels like it's 2015 all over again. And that's not necessarily a bad thing with your veterans producing, but you want Robertson to shoulder the majority of that offensive load. And it just hasn't quite been the same. And I said this on a recent podcast. I feel like there's been a lot of passengers early this season on Dallas. You could call out a lot of different names, including Miro, Heiskanen, the big guys on the Stars. Hopefully they have a response. We saw it the other night against Pittsburgh. Can they do it against some of the better teams in the NHL? That's a real question that is starting to be brought up. And you look at Pete DeBoer in his 3rd season, maybe just something's not clicking because the offense as a whole doesn't seem to be firing on all cylinders. So, I mean, I'm not worried about Jason Robertson. Maybe that 109-point season is going to be a bit of an anomaly. You never know, but he definitely has the potential to be a 40-goal scorer. And yeah, if you told me he would be, at 7 points in the first 14 games, I really wouldn't believe you. I expected big things from him.
Yeah, it can all change. All it takes is just kind of one thing to get you going. Last year, Kirill got off to a little bit of a slow start, but obviously was dealing with the injury that ended the previous season. And then all of a sudden, the switch just flipped after the trip overseas, and the next thing you know, he's on a 115-point pace over the final 60 games of the season. So all it takes is a spark to get you going, and those numbers will rise. So last year, former Wild defenseman Ryan Suter, part of the Dallas D-Corps, and now this year, former Wild defenseman Matt Dumba, part of the Dallas D-Corps. I know, just looking at the statistics here, no points yet for Dumba through the first 9 games. But how has he been utilized for Dallas, and what have you thought of the Dumba addition so far this year?
Yeah, I've pretty much subscribed to the fact that Matt Dumba is Matt Dumba. We kind of understood the type of player he was, and we're kind of getting that at this point in the season. And it's not like I'm disappointed in him, and it's not like I'm surprised by him. Somebody that's been a pleasant surprise has been Ilya Lyubushkin. I think he has been great. Dumba has been paired with Miro Heiskanen, and I think a lot of Stars fans thought that was going to open up Miro's offensive game because he can play on his strong side. That hasn't been the case. I've looked at the advanced numbers over here over the last week or so, and Dumba and Heiskanen are like second to last on the Stars in terms of expected goals percentage. So maybe that is a reason for Miro's really, really slow start offensively this season. Matt Dumba was healthy scratched on Monday against Pittsburgh for the first time this season, and Miro played alongside Esa Lindell, and maybe this is just recency bias, but, Miro has 2 goals in that game on Monday because Lindell is a better version of Matt Dumba. Lindell is probably a top 10 defensive defenseman in the NHL. He has been over the last, really 5 or 6 years, and I think they were hoping to get that and Matt Dumba, but there are just weaknesses to Dumba's game. And I think when Miro's playing alongside him, he's worried a lot more about his own net and protecting him rather than reaching his full potential. So I think the Stars actually got an unintended solution to their problem with the healthy scratch. Put somebody else with Miro, whether that's Lindell or Lyubushkin. That can be your top pairing. Lindell should be in your top 4. Lindell can play with Harley or Heiskanen. It really doesn't matter. And Dumba can be your 6th defenseman because I think that's the role that suits him. And if you remember before the season, I was saying all the time, I don't think Matt Dumba is going to thrive in a top 4 role here in Dallas. And I know that's not necessarily how they utilize him. He doesn't play a ton on the PK, mainly because he takes a lot of penalties. It's not like he's getting power play time. And at 5-on-5, he's just Matt Dumba. He has his issues. And I hate to use that as a negative connotation, but that's kind of what I've gotten out of Matt Dumba. But I think with what we saw on Monday, I think the Stars are going to be a lot better suited because they're starting to figure out what they have. And it's not Dumba alongside Miro.
A lot of Wild fans listening to this and watching are like,
yes,
yep. This is what we came to know over the last few seasons. It is unfortunate because he was off to a really good start as more of an offensive defenseman before that injury just robbed him of his shot completely. And then you got to try to figure out, what do I do as a defenseman if I'm not just the rocket shot from the top of the power play? So I think you hit it right on the head. Is maybe he's not meant to be in that top 4, but it leads to another combination that hopefully can work better. But
and he can be productive as a 5th or 6th defenseman, right?
Yeah.
I think he can be successful, and that's not a bad thing. Not everybody is meant to be a top 6 forward. You need guys that play a role, and that's just probably where Dumba is in his career at this point.
Yeah. Well, that's about all I have because I'm really intrigued for the Take Us Home segment that you have lined up for segment 3. So I'm ready to rock.
Yes, sir. Real or not real? I have some very general NHL questions for Seth that he will have to answer. Find out a bit more in just a moment. Today's crossover edition is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get that hunch in the middle of the game, when Sam Darnold is ready to leave that final drive because Minnesota is firing, Skol Vikings, Seth, Skol Vikings. You can view the live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more of FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Well, Seth, before we do jump into this final segment, how about the Vikings and Wild off to a fantastic start? That doesn't happen a whole lot in Minnesota. I imagine you have to feel pretty good up there in the great land of 10,000 lakes.
It's been a fun fall and winter, because we run the gambit here in Minnesota with the sports teams. Like, you got the Twins, who just gave up on the season halfway through, basically is the best way that I can put that, and are debating whether or not to keep their current ownership. So you kind of go from that to, okay, this Vikings team's not expected to be that good. They very much have been a pleasant surprise so far this year. And then you get to wild season, and you're like, I don't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, in the first 15 games, they've got 10 wins, and you're like, okay, this is a very good start. So it's just kind of been a baton pass from team to team, and the Wild are like, now we'll keep this for a while.
It's a perfect segue into a real or not real segment. The Twins were certainly not real last summer. Okay, Seth, we'll keep the first question here inside the Central Division. Real or not real, the Winnipeg Jets?
Boy, oh boy, you literally could not have gotten off to a better start if you're the Winnipeg Jets. And, the interesting thing here is it feels like a lot of what has gone right for Winnipeg just has been, the stars aligning, everything coming together. They're getting outrageous offense. They are getting amazing goaltending. The special teams numbers are just insane for the Jets. You always wonder when the shoe is going to drop. Like, when is the course correction coming? But here's the thing is, like, you wonder how that takes shape. Like, okay, the goaltending maybe suffers. Well, you've got the offense to be able to take care of that, or maybe the offense dries up a little bit. You've got the goaltending to be able to muster that as well. Mm-hmm. It's just a really, really solidly constructed team. They're not, I don't think they're going to do this the whole season, but it is interesting to note that the Boston Bruins last year, got off to this just insanely good start, or 2 years ago, got off to this insanely good start, had the best regular season of all time. How'd the playoffs go?
Yeah.
Like they just could not sustain it through the postseason. And it doesn't really matter how good your regular season is if it is met with a first-round exit. Like, that season for Boston was an utter failure because they didn't win a round. And so for Winnipeg, the things that I look at that are definitely leading me to believe that this is a really, really good team is, obviously, you've got one of the best goaltenders in the league playing very, very well. And if you go through any sort of struggles or you weather any sort of injuries, he's a guy that can get you through that. Mm-hmm. So I think this is not a mirage for this Winnipeg team. They're not going to win at this level the whole season. They'll have a little bit of kind of a fall back to earth, so to speak. But I think they've got pieces in place to be able to weather like a full-scale collapse. It just, it depends on if they can keep this going in the postseason.
Yeah, you mentioned Boston too a few years ago, and they really never faced any adversity either.
Yeah.
They just kind of sleptwalked the last half of the season, and then when it gets turned up because it's the Stanley Cup playoffs, sometimes you're not ready to compete at that level. So it's good to have that adversity. It's good to go through some of those rough stretches. And the Stars got a look at Winnipeg the other day, and they look like the real deal. They absolutely are. Okay, my next proposition for you, and this is personally for the Wild, Kirill Kaprizov. He should be the Hart favorite. Real or not real?
Real. So here's the thing. He is doing a lot of what he's doing by facing extra pressure and attention from opponents. And that's not to say that that's the wrong way to do it. Teams should obviously throw a lot of their attention at him. But Kirill has been doing a good job of facilitating to his line mates to set them up for good opportunities. That's why he's got 19 assists through the first 15, 16 games of the season. Here's where his numbers could get even better. At some point, teams are going to start trying to switch the approach and say, well, we can't leave mismatches against his line mates. So we got to try to take those guys away. And then all of a sudden, instead of having 2 or 3 players focusing on Kaprizov specifically, All of a sudden, then you go to 1-2, and you throw the rest of the 4 to try to keep his line mates out of the play. Then at that point, that's when he starts to do his thing and starts to put people on cereal boxes and milk cartons and dunk posters. And that's when his goal numbers are going to just skyrocket. Because right now he's been more of a facilitator on the power play, more of a facilitator on his line as well. Once those goal numbers get going, we're talking 50, 55, 60 goals. He's fully healthy.
Yeah.
He's got a really good supporting cast in the top 6, and John Hynes knows how to utilize him properly. That is a recipe for a guy who is going to put up some dangerous numbers so far this year. And so what we're seeing from Kirill so far this year, it's very real, and this is going to make the rest of the Central Division sweat a little bit. It's very sustainable.
And if Minnesota continues to win, he's going to be right in that Hart Trophy
conversation.
100%. You have to win. I mean, if he, I mean, let's just be frank. If Minnesota wins the Central, I think he wins it.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
I think if the Wild win the Central, I think there are going to be a lot of Minnesota awards this year.
Yeah, absolutely. He's off to a fantastic start. He's a lot of fun to watch. Okay, another team within the Central, and then I just have another general one for you. Nashville, real or not real? Are they this bad? Is this really a terrible Nashville team, Seth?
This one is really interesting because deep down, I don't believe that they are as bad as they've played.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you probably would agree with that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Like, you know the rule. We're getting close to Thanksgiving, and the adage is if you're in a playoff spot by Thanksgiving, you usually stay there.
Yeah, it's like one or two teams.
Yeah, unless you have something catastrophic happen that you just can't overcome. Nashville is right now through 16 games. They've got 12 points. And you look at some of the other numbers too. They've got 39 goals. They've given up 53 goals so far this season.
That's with UC Soros.
It's like
He's got Wedgwood, who's a decent backup.
I keep wanting them to prove me wrong, and they just keep doing what they have been doing. And so it's going to get to the point where it's going to take a monumental run from them to be able to get themselves in position for, like, I mean, at this point, like, you're 18 points behind Winnipeg, 16 games into the season. That is bananas.
Mm-hmm.
And you're 11 points behind the Wild right now and 6 points behind the Dallas Stars. But the Dallas Stars have played 14 games. So, if Dallas wins both of those games, all of a sudden they're 10 points clear of Nashville. Like, at some point you got to make this deficit up, but you have to then have the teams in front of you play as bad as you have to be able to get yourself back into it.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas feels like a team that is staring uphill right now with the way Winnipeg has gone off to a good start. I mean, it's got to be Mount Everest for Nashville. It's just, you're asking for a lot of things to go right, to even sniff a wild card spot. If this continues for another 2 weeks, you're asking for everything to go right.
Like, that's why I think you're starting to see some of the comments from Barry Trotz. Like, if we don't get this figured out, we're gonna have to alter our plans a little bit. And it looks like maybe they kind of got it figured out, and then all of a sudden they have lost 6 out of their last 8. So it's like, I just don't know. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, you know what? We owe Locked On Jets a huge apology. We really do. After our roundtable earlier, before the season started, we were just being up on everybody but the Preds, and the Preds have come out and done this. So we'll have
to do a halfway through with the current current teams that are in playoff spots, so that we can, because we did it in the playoff hopefuls. We did the same thing in saying of the teams in the Central who's likely to fall out, and we all said the Jets.
Yep.
So I think we just need to get Harrison in both shows and just say, I was wrong.
Yes.
You were right. Just do the Happy Gilmore
Go
monologue.
Jets, give me a neon cap or whatever it was. Yeah, for theme nights.
I'll just repeat the speech that Happy Gilmore says to Chubbs, and because we were all wrong. Like we were all wrong about the Winnipeg Jets.
And I think Harrison would even subscribe to that. To some degree. I don't even think he saw this coming. Okay, a final one for you because we've gone a little bit over, but this has been a lot of fun. Real or not real? Alex Ovechkin, the great A. Does he get it done this year? What a start. He had that really slow start last season. Then he started to pile up some goals towards the end. If he sustains this, I don't know what his goal pace is quite right now, but I mean, it has to be pretty close to getting the record done and beating the great one.
I can tell you, he's on pace for 59 goals this season.
That would clear it then, right? Because he needs 42. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Who'd have thought Washington going out and getting some younger players to put around him has been a huge difference. And
Shocker.
The Capitals 10-4 right now. Here's the thing, like as long as he's productive, they can just keep feeding him the puck, and I see no reason. He may not get 59, but I don't see any reason why he can't keep this going because the team around him is good. And you know what happens to older players on teams like this? They get a little bit of revitalization. Yeah. They get some of that energy back in their system.
Tyler Seguin, Joe Pavelski. I mean, the Stars have kind of held the system, it feels like, over the last few years. Get all the mid-30s and bring them in.
So I see no reason that this can't continue unless he were to suffer some sort of an injury. But that's not something you can really plan for. I mean, he's like it's been a fantastic start. 10 goals in 14 games. Like, he just looks like the old Ovechkin.
Yeah, man, he is sitting on that circle and he is clapping bombs over there. And it is vintage and a ton of fun. I think he gets it done this year. It just feels like the season for him to do it because who knows, as the years continue to pile on the minutes, sometimes it doesn't get very pretty. So hopefully it's why he has this young squad around him and they're competitive. That'll probably help tremendously. It'll help tremendously. So they've been off to a great start as well. Okay, that wraps up today's final segment of Real Not Real. Seth, thank you so much for joining us today. Always a pleasure to reconnect with you. Stars versus Wild tomorrow at the XL Energy Center. Give me your prediction real quick, and then let the fans know where they can find you as well.
Make sure to check out Locked On Wild. We got lucky, and all the socials are just at Locked On Wild, so can follow us on all of those. And I'm feeling generous here. I am going to go with. I think we're going to see a goalie off.
Oh, okay.
Much like we did in Game 1 of the postseason 2 years ago. Maybe not a double overtime because that isn't a thing in the regular season.
Yes.
But give me a 2-1 win for the Minnesota Wild in overtime.
Okay, I was thinking opposite. I really was. I was going to go 6-4. Like just an absolute barn burner, Seth. It's going to get funky. So that's what I'm going with. Give me the Stars. Why not? They need an offensive explosion. Maybe 5 power play goals or something like that. Yeah, I think the postcasts on Locked On Wild would not be fun after an outcome like that.
Thank goodness I just got a haircut because I would not have any hair to pull out in that type of a game because I've seen plenty of them between these two teams over the last few years that have just been pear-shaped.
Seth, always a good time, brother. Thank you so much as always. Appreciate all of you wonderful listeners, you Wild fans, you Stars fans for joining us on today's crossover edition. I'm sure we're going to do another one at one point. It's always nice to reconnect and talk about what's going on in Dallas and St. Paul. Be sure to catch us on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. You can find Locked On Wild, of course, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Seth on the X and Twitter machine. Have a great Friday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the game tomorrow. And, of course, we'll be back on Monday to discuss all things from that contest. We'll see you.